having this interview with us. Yeah. The thing I want to talk about today is more about life purpose. I remember when I was we were in school together. The only thing I actually very admire you is like you have a plan. Already have like your idea of like going into music and everything. Like it's I think it's very interesting that you knew what you want at that period. So I think it's rather amazing. So how did you arrive at that?
Yeah, it's not so much a plan rather than just a small voice in my heart or in my mind. Things tend to come together, and during your adolescent years, a teenager is exposed to different things, and generally, I think for most people, when they reach the age of 15, 16, they come together and start talking about their futures, maybe make plans for it, choosing subjects and everything. And I just have this little voice inside that says, perhaps go into music. But it's a small voice plus an image in my mind, and the image was the maestro Claudio Abbado conducting. And what struck me at that time was that Claudio Abbado was a very impressive and talented conductor, creating beautiful music, but at the same time, he has a heart for young musicians, and he's very selfless in regards to sharing this craft with young people. And somehow that image crystallized something, perhaps my aspirations. And I remember while I was talking to my classmates that I decided to go into music.
Yeah, I remember you have some help too, because let's say the music teacher at that time, Mr. Kong, is actually very encouraging of you. So remember, like us people were just fooling around in music class, but you are actually learning music at that point.
I was learning inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. Like a teenager from a typical Asian family, I was forced to learn the piano, and the piano is a great instrument. I wasn't totally talented in it. A lot of people were more talented, but while studying piano with another teacher, I wondered if studying piano or studying music needed to be so dry, just repetition and everything. Obviously, we were practicing for the Royal School of Music exams, but at the same time, there were pieces that I wanted to try, either from different musical eras, perhaps romantic pieces. I remember wanting to play some of Beethoven's pieces, some of Brahms' pieces. Some of them were beyond my ability, but I thought I really wanted to play those. And then there were pop pieces that I wanted to play, but I was kind of restricted to certain pieces. And every time I go into the class, perhaps I didn't practice so well, so the teacher always wanted me to repeat, and I always wanted to see the point in repeating. What am I improving? Am I improving technique or what? And I wasn't really sure. But at the same time, like you said, Mr. Cheng was my music theory teacher, and music theory, I think, except for a few composition majors or enthusiasts of music theory, I think most musicians see music theory as something rather dry and difficult to learn. Definitely, it was difficult for me to learn, but Mr. Cheng had this demeanor, this way of imparting knowledge that made everything seem not as hard as they seem, and through his friendly ways, we achieved our goals step by step. And then it was fun along the way. And so Mr. Cheng was very influential that way. Another way was that he actually sanctioned my first conducting endeavor. When I was 16 years old, when I was in Form 4, I was supposed to sing in the choir, but my voice still didn't break. I was still singing with a relatively high voice, and so I couldn't sing in the choir. So I just, gathered my confidence and asked Mr. Cheng whether I could actually conduct the choir. And Mr. Cheng said, okay. And then so the next day when we went back to school, he chose 60 Form 1 boys, a treble choir, and he said, he gave the choir to me to conduct and rehearse and compete. And so that's where I got my start.
I think a lot of people would like to know that how do you get exposed to music? Is your family very musical as well?
They are musical, but not musical in today's sense. today's family, they really know how to groom a kid. They spend a lot of money finding the right coaches, sending them to summer camps, sending them to overseas competitions and everything. Just very proper grooming. I think in our household, I was fortunate. Both my parents were exposed to music. They both enjoy classical music. My mother sang in the church choir. My dad conducted a church choir, but they never really gave me very formal training outside of school. They sent me to a children's choir, but that's the extent of it, and the rest of it is through interaction with other students, with other classmates, and just generally searching your own identity.
I think that talking about searching identity, like a lot of parents would think about if their children want to be involved in music, which of course in Hong Kong people think about either stocks or selling houses, that sort of thing, and talking about like finding a job in the job market rather than music is nice, maybe it's just a hobby. So did your family give you pressure to make a decision?
They actually didn't give me any pressure, so I was thankful about that. They just let me choose my own path.
That's great, did you always want that, or you always think about like something else as well at the same time?
Well, while I was 16, I made up my mind to study music. But while in college, a little bit of background. My family's financial situation wasn't very good throughout my high school years, and after Form 6, I had to quit school, even though the university accepted me already. But because I had to work and perhaps earn some money for the family. During that tougher period, one would naturally wonder if you could still pursue your calling as such. And so, when I was given the chance to go, I really, cherished it and just went. And while some people would complain about boarding school, about dorm food or whatever, I was just grateful that there was a decent bed and the food was decent and I had a chance to pursue my calling. And so, for that, I was very thankful. But still, I think while I was finishing my second year of college and starting my third year, because my grades were decent in English, in literature, and in history, I actually started thinking about perhaps changing my major and then eventually going into law school. And I had a lot of conversations with my professor back then. But then, after a few months of struggle, I decided to stay with music.
That's great. But even in music, I think there are different kinds of venues. So why did you decide to come back and teach music?
There's something we'd say magical about this school. A lot of my classmates, a lot of my schoolmates and alumni at this school would say that if it hadn't been for DBS, we wouldn't be who we are today. And so I share the same sentiment. And so when there was a chance to come back to teach, I really wanted to pursue that, because I also felt that I owed the school a lot. I think the guidance, the space, the opportunity to explore, I think these things were very, very important, and I wanted to perpetuate this and share this with the next generation.
Okay, so you don't see it as a sacrifice of maybe not being a conductor for a symphony or something like that?
I used to, when I was young, I used to, you watch the Oscars and you dream of, making it and then, giving thanks to your family and blah, blah, and, conducting the world-class orchestra and all that. But, I had this interesting conversation with my Headmaster, Mr. Locom, while I was studying my master's. And I wrote him, I was struggling whether to stay in the States after I get my master's to either pursue a doctorate degree or work with a professional group. And so I couldn't decide. I wrote Mr. Locom, and of course he wrote back and gave me something quite wise to think about. And he said that if you follow your mind, you will be successful, but you might not feel very content. But if you follow your heart, you might not be successful, but you will feel very content as a person. And so, at that moment, I think he knows what I was thinking deep down inside, and I wanted to come back home. And And so, after I received that letter, I made up my mind to come back. And so, you can say it's a sacrifice for not working with a professional orchestra or getting another degree or something. But I think the opportunity to work with generations of young people more than make up for it.
And you're talking about a very interesting thing, is mentoring. So after you have your situation of success in what you want to do, when students come forward, talking about their problems of not finding their own true path in life, what kind of advice would you advise them?
I'd advise them to really listen to the little voice in the mind or in the heart. I think deep down, each person knows what his or her passion might be, and I think each person should spend some time listening to it and pursuing that. Granted, I know there's a lot of pressure, the pressure to make a decent living, the pressure of parental expectations and all that. But I think if you listen to your heart, if you follow that little voice, I think it will give you more energy, more ability to persevere, to really to survive the climb. I mean, even if you're pursuing something you really love, there's enough pressure or negative things to affect you. And so the more the reason to pursue something that you really feel passionate about, so that it'll give you the impetus to really stick to it. Yeah, otherwise it'd be very difficult to survive.
Definitely. And what about, how to convince the parents? Because sometimes they think that, this is not going to go anywhere, or they are thinking about it, maybe it's just a phase, you like history, you like photography, you like something, but is it what you want to do?
Well, first of all, I think most of the time, the care from the parents are genuine. So they worry, you like photography, is that going to make a decent living? Because they worry about you. When they're gone, will you still be able to make a living? So those things are legitimate. But, replace music with photography, or with IT, with video games even. During your mid or early teens, if a young person can start having a dialogue with the parent, because it's a cycle, and whether it's a positive cycle or a vicious cycle, a negative cycle, downward spiral, it depends on how you interact. Because the parents, obviously, because they love the child so much and worry about the child so much, they would naturally want to plan ahead for them. They want to plan so that they will avoid the pitfalls and everything. But if the child can somehow take the initiative to communicate with the parents and at least show the parents a little bit, tell them something that's it's like a responsible decision, or a responsible inclination, instead of a phase. I mean, obviously everybody still go through phases, but if they can communicate with the parent, then there'll be an interaction between a positive communication. Otherwise, the parents will say, okay, this boy or this girl is getting more and more passive, then I better, take on the responsibility more, talk to more people, build more network, create more opportunity for my son and daughter. And the negative thing is that the son and daughter will see the parents getting more and more proactive, and they'll think, oh, okay, there's no point for me to do anything else because my parents have already dictated my first 30 years of my life. And so, it'll become a negative cycle. But if the child can somehow communicate proactively with the parents, I think that might help things.
Yeah.
Not easy though.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, if you go back to our school history, for example, Dr. Diocesan actually followed his own calling as well, going from studying English to being a doctor and of course being into politics, basically. So I found out that we actually have a statue of him, here, which wasn't here before, when we were here. So is there a story behind that?
Well, the statue was donated by Dr. Sun's granddaughter. And so I think the granddaughter wanted to honor the grandfather, Dr. Sun, by erecting a statue at every spot that Dr. Sun has stopped while he was in Hong Kong. And obviously, DBS or Diocesan School was the first school that Dr. Sun went to when he arrived in Hong Kong. And you know the story behind Dr. Sun coming to Hong Kong. And one of the things he did was that he challenged the authorities inside based on his religious beliefs and other beliefs. But I think the story went something like this. He went to one of the statues of the god temples and took down the arm of one of the statues and challenged that if the god is real, then the god should come down and save himself or something. I think back then Dr. Sun was already I think he had inclinations, if not committed already, to Christianity. And obviously there's a certain element of teenage rebellion there, but the principle is the same. A young person would always have this rebellious streak to try to find his own identity. And so, as a reminder or as an environment to foster their growth, we also encourage our young people to maybe not challenge, but at least question the things that they are taught. We don't want to squash them too much. We allow them the opportunity to rebel a bit, without hurting other people, to question things.
Yeah, but also our school always have a tradition of being very courteous because we are supposed to be a very good school, so based on manners and everything. But talking about this is very interesting because in Hong Kong, people are talking about like people getting more and more rough, the manners are going on, and people are getting much more frustrated. So it's not only students, but also regular people on the streets. So did you feel that as well in the school?
Yeah, well, obviously we want to impart a certain nobility of spirit and mind among the boys. We want them to behave well, but we're also realistic that boys will always be boys. I think there's something unnatural if a boy is courteous and civilized from the very beginning, from teenager all the way up to adult years. I've seen a lot of good men who were actually quite rebellious and sometimes rude or sometimes rowdy when they were kids. And yes, we are a famous school, we are quote-unquote an elite school, but we're also a very human school. As such, we're prone to mistakes. The headmaster makes mistakes, teachers make mistakes, and certainly students make mistakes. I think the key is to see how the students recover from making their mistakes. And I think record shows, parents will tell you, classmates will tell you that they don't always behave well. Here, sometimes they have to struggle between, questioning authority and, embracing a certain civility. And teenagers are not always successful with that. But they struggle, and we try to guide them so that they can reach a certain equilibrium there. But certainly, as you said, the society as a whole is quite volatile these days, and so it makes it doubly challenging for teachers and students.
Oh, definitely. As I recall that in our day, basically, the headmaster can give us a caning and everything as a kind of a discipline of sorts and everything. And also, the situation has changed so much, like in terms of like how people view, teaching, discipline, and everything. So when you arrive at your job as the headmaster, you face a lot of different challenges. As opposed to your predecessors. So how did you resolve them?
Well, when it comes to students, I'd love to be able to cane them again. The law doesn't allow that. But the model within TBS, while we were growing up, the ideal paternal figure was Mr. Lowcock. And yes, he was, during those times, the headmaster is allowed to cane the students. But I think caning is actually secondary to the care that Mr. Lowcock shows. And so every student who's made a mistake entering into the headmaster's office knew that he was going to be disciplined. But he also walked in knowing that the headmaster is a caring headmaster. And so, yes, it's going to be painful, but he knows that, he knew that Mr. Lowcock cared for every student there. And so what happens in caning is that yes, there's physical pain involved. You get whipped once or twice, and you get to choose the thickness of the cane. But you also know that once you're caned, then the book is closed. And I think the principle is still consistent in school, even in the 21st century, is that we don't encourage students making mistakes, but we know that making mistakes is natural. natural for growing up process. And so what caning did was that after you cane a student, the book is closed, everything is forgotten. And I think the virtue lies in that. Obviously, we cannot cane students now, and so you need to try to use. Obviously, you want to draw clear boundaries so that they can follow the rules. But on the other hand, you want to keep the spirit of care among the students, so that they know that you're supporting them and you're guiding them to be responsible young adults.
Oh, that sounds like an interesting balancing act.
It's not easy.
Yeah, and then I see you also, giving, like lectures and everything about education. So did you actually receive some courses and something to, to really get to, make psychology or something like that?
Yes. When you study, my other master's degree was in education, and of course every teacher needed to be qualified and get the postgraduate degree, postgraduate diploma. And so yes, in the classroom we studied topics of education psychology and everything, but I think that what's most beneficial, what is most helpful is when teachers and head principals, when they come together and communicate about students, then you get a more comprehensive perspective. For example, a student might be rude in class, or he might lose focus in class and start daydreaming or sleeping or whatever. Then within the classroom, the teacher would think that this boy is problematic. But if you get a perspective from his coach or from parents or from his friends, it might be because he's tired. And if he's rebellious, maybe because it's actually a function of his lack of confidence. And so if you know that, the more you know the person in a 360-degree way, in a more comprehensive way, the more conducive to understanding and to proper guidance. So the best thing is not to take anything for granted.
Yeah, so actually you have sort of like a mentoring system here as well?
Yes, in different departments there are mentors and mentees, advisors and advisees, but we try to make it, we try to encourage the teachers to take on the role of mentor and friends, and especially in a boys' school like ours, or the culture that we have here, it just doesn't work for a person to just come in and behave like the authoritative figure. The boys don't take it too well. It works much better when when the students know that the teacher actually cares for their well-being.
Last question I want to ask is how do you foresee the future? Now you have been headmaster for some time now, for the next few years and stuff like that. So what do you see is the main challenges of our school, not only our school but other schools in Hong Kong now?
The challenge for the school is that now, to graduate from secondary level, you have one do-or-die exam. What it means is that you have to start prepping for it, but since you have to start prepping for it as early as grade 10, Form 4, which means the subjects you choose will affect your standing in the exams, which means that you have to do well in Form 2 and Form 3. So the pressure is quite immense. And even though EDB and the government has good intentions and designed it in a way that is conducive to critical thinking, active thinking and all that, but still, because all the families know that this is a do-or-die exam, most families would start discouraging the students from taking on extracurricular activities. And we think that extracurricular activities, whether it be building self-esteem, building leadership abilities, serving, or competitions, all these things equip the student for the long term, and a lot of times they don't reflect in the exam grade. And yes, it's very important for you to pass that do-or-die exam and get into college, but what is essential for the growth of a person is not reflected in that paper. And so the school has to have that courage to maintain that part and persuade the parents, or join forces with the parents to encourage the students to keep going for those things, because in order to success, actually these things are as important, if not more important, than the diploma.
Definitely,
So,
definitely. Well, thank you for
thank you.
having this discussion. You know, like I know a lot more now, basically.
Thank you.
About you. Thank you.